Childcare completely fell through tonight, so I'm stuck at home.
Brian? Okay, we're recording. Okay. Right. Good evening, everyone. Recording. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the September 25th Joint Facilities Advisory Commission meeting. We are holding a hybrid public meeting which enables remote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia for JFAC's electronic meeting policy. At this time, I'd like to orient everyone with our hybrid environment and cover a few specifics about how the meeting will be run. Members of the public may attend the meeting here in person or electronically. Additionally, there's a dial-in option for those who wish to use it. For commissioners who are joining virtually, please keep your camera on. Otherwise, you will be marked absent and unable to participate in the meeting. Keep your phones and devices muted until you're called upon. For our virtual attendees using Microsoft Teams, please turn off your video feed. I will address when it's appropriate to turn it on in a moment. If commissioners participating virtually wish to be recognized to speak on an item during the course of the meeting, please raise the virtual hand in Teams. I monitor the video feeds that are on as an indicator of who would like to speak. Additional notes for members of the public who would like to provide feedback and comment. We will hold public comment periods at the beginning and end of the meeting. Those requesting to speak may do so for only one comment period and will be allotted up to 3 minutes to speak on tonight's agenda items. Lastly, this is a public forum. Today's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. I'm not bad too. Hello, Matt. Oh.
Hi, Stacy.
Okay.
Hi, JFAC.
Okay. Hello. Are you hearing sound, Matt and Wells?
Yes, I can hear the meeting. Thank you.
I can hear it too.
Okay.
No video though.
Okay. Oh, good.
I can see the video.
Okay, this is interesting. I'm not really sure how to troubleshoot 3 different things.
It might just be me. Don't worry about it. I will continue to listen.
Okay. Okay. Well, welcome. I'd like to just thank you all for attending in person. We have more than a quorum, which is great. We do have Wells identified participating virtually, and probably Andy said he was going to call in virtually as well. He's traveling for work. We have a new APS staff liaison. This is Aji Robinson. Aji, do you want to just give a brief introduction?
Good evening. Happy to be here. I haven't done this in a while. Excuse me. So it's nice to be back in person. It's also nice to be doing evening meetings. I think this is my 12th or 13th year with APS. So we very much appreciate this collaboration that we have. I haven't seen it in many counties that I've worked where we have so much citizen involvement in what we do. So currently I'm the Assistant Director of Design and Construction. So I'm not in the planning department, so I may not be able to provide answers today, especially this is my first meeting, but I'll be taking notes. And the other thing I did want to say is this, you had mentioned this, we do have our planning staff, even though Robert is no longer with us, the rest of the planning department is still in facility. So anything that we've been working with you all on is still ongoing.
And Robert Ruiz has moved on to another school division. So we appreciate the work that we did with them. Look forward to working with Aji. And take care of that comment. And I also want to recognize that we have a new school board liaison, at least for the next couple months. Our school board liaison was Miranda Turner. But now with the change of the chairship and with the rolling off of school board membership, we will have Christina Diaz-Torres for the next few months. And she will probably be replaced by her seat. And our county board liaison continues to be Susan Cunningham. So, and both Christina and Susan were former JFAC members. The originals. So, yeah. Everybody have a good summer. Welcome back. Okay, do we have any public comment? Agenda items. Okay, moving forward to the electronic meeting policy.
Yeah, so did everyone have time to review the policy ahead of time? I gave everyone a copy of it. Just look at it now.
This is a draft that is across multiple commissions, right? So if we've seen this in another context, it's the same draft, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Just wanted to double check that.
Yeah, the county attorney's office put it together and basically it was just a plug in your commission name and you're good to go. So.
Okay. Do you want to just go over what makes this electronic meeting policy a little bit different than what we had and just go over those rules again?
Yeah, do you want me to start with the presentation?
Yeah.
On the meeting policies?
Yeah.
And then we can, okay,
Okay.
that works.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. I think it's coming up.
Here we go.
Oh. Been doing this for a while and still. Have issues figuring out something. Oh, I don't want you guys to see my notes. One second.
Thank you for your patience, everyone. Technological.
It works. It's worthless if it's not gonna. Try one time.
It's just the way that doing it, go to view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were you saying?
Well,
Or can we just read it?
Shape
Yeah,
this
yes,
like
for
that.
the presentation. Go to the meeting there and share and go up there now. See if you're get to share. And then share your window.
Let me try on here.
Still sharing your.
Well, we can still
I-
use it.
And
Doesn't have to be full screen. You can
Let
just
me
put between.
save this as like a PDF real quick. I usually do this ahead of time because this happens all the time, but okay.
Emily, I could see it on my end. Was it showing presentation mode on your end? Is that the issue?
You know, I think it's just because I'm in here and on there, so it's like displaying the same thing.
Ah,
But yeah, I guess for people like remotely, it's fine. Okay.
do you want to email it to me and I can share it from my end?
I think I'm good now. I
Okay.
saved it as a PDF. Thanks, though. Okay, thank you for dealing with that. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to give a quick update on the changes that were adopted during the General Assembly session regarding the new electronic meeting policies, and then just some existing policies on FOIA. So we're still able to hold hybrid meetings, so in person and people virtually, and all virtual meetings. So for commissioners to be able to participate remotely, there needs to be a physical quorum in person. JFAC has 9 members, so that would be 5 people.
Does it matter? Does the chair and the vice chair have to be one of those people, or does it matter?
As long as it's,
5
as
people.
long as there's 5.
So an electronic meeting policy has to be in place, which we're hopefully adopting today. And then that needs to be adopted annually. So by September 2025 next year or earlier. If a member wants to participate remotely, they have to request to do so or notify the chair and staff liaison, because that does need to be reflected in the meeting minutes. So here are the instances where you can participate remotely during a hybrid meeting. And in these cases, you wouldn't count towards the in-person quorum, but you could participate electronically if there is a quorum in person. So if the member has a temporary or permanent disability or other medical condition that prevents the member's physical attendance, a medical condition of a member of the commissioner's family requires the member to provide care that prevents the member's physical attendance. The member has a personal matter and identifies with specificity the nature of the personal matter. And you can only do this twice or for 25% of the meetings per calendar year. Or the member's principal residence is more than 60 miles from the meeting location, which is usually not applicable in Arlington. So something new, if you meet the definition of a caregiver, you can participate remotely and count towards the quorum as if you were there in person. So the caregiver has to be related by blood, marriage, adoption, or the legally appointed guardian of the person with a disability for whom they're caring for. So regarding virtual meetings, there are some exceptions like planning commission and school board that can't meet virtually, but JFAC can. And now they can meet up to 50% of meetings, up from 25% prior to July 1. They still cannot be held consecutively, but a new change is that all members must participate with their cameras on during the entire meeting. Otherwise, they're considered as absent from the meeting. So here's just an overview to reiterate. We have to adopt an electronic meeting policy once a year. Virtual meetings can be up to 50% of the meetings a year, but not consecutively. The public must be able to hear and see all members, and members that meet the definition of caregiver and need to meet remotely will count towards the in-person quorum. Now just an overview of FOIA. So what constitutes a meeting? This is when 3 or more members meet formally or informally, in person or electronically, where public business is discussed or transacted, whether minutes or votes are taken or not. So if this is the case, public notice must be given at least 3 working days prior and open to the public. Emails may constitute a meeting under FOIA if there is a simultaneous email communication between 3 or more members. If it looks like a conversation, it is, and as a general rule, avoid reply all. And then emails related to public business or public records, regardless of whether it is your personal email account or phone. So it's good to not commingle this personal with business because all of it will be public. So for best practice is to email Stacy or me with any materials or information you want circulated to the commission, and to copy Stacy, me, and Aji on all communications related to commission business, so there is a record of the correspondence. And with that, I have me and Aji's contact information here. If you don't have that for any questions.
Sorry, the slide that talks about don't reply all. I saw other guidance recently that finally clarified. It's like within a minute. The point is simultaneousness.
Right.
And it always has frustrated me, this whole idea of don't reply all, as opposed to don't engage in simultaneous emails. That's what makes it a meeting.
Yeah.
And someone update those slides, because
Yeah.
the county attorneys are finally saying things like, if it's been within a minute, don't reply.
Yeah.
That's more accurate rather than don't reply all.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of these things are just like a better safe than sorry.
But it's not, but there are trade-offs to not replying all.
Right.
So it's not
And we all
better.
want access to the information. And I did actually read the opinions, skim them, and it's like, sorry guys, we cannot have a chat room. That disappoints everyone, but it's when I read it, it was things like, well, the commission members didn't respond for like 4 hours. So we couldn't also, I think, say, okay, 7 to 9 Wednesday night, let's all get on our email.
Right.
Like that, it's both intent as well as just experience.
Yeah.
So.
But there are trade-offs to not reply.
Absolutely. And
So
efficiency for people like the chair and
Yeah.
members as well.
I also think that it's important, it's always been, I've always understood these open meeting requirements to, whether the letter of the law or not, is that we can't conduct official business over email. And, we have to have a quorum to conduct official business. And in order to conduct official business, we have to have that meeting advertised 3 days in advance with the public agenda and public materials. And so, replying to all or just reply, I just think as
conducting official business is a discrete concept that involves voting. So it's not necessary, or listening. But it's not necessarily just anything. I mean,
if it's JFAC business, it's JFAC business.
that doesn't mean it only have to happen. That's why there's a different, freedom of information covers information. It's broader. Meetings cover live discussion and deliberation.
And generally, in agreement with that.
I understand too, dealing with FOIA as a staff member is really, we have discussions all the time, like, in this situation, that situation, but yeah, this is
I mean,
guidance we've been
and
given, so.
By the
yeah.
way, board members engage in all sorts of things as long as it's phone conversations, there's nothing writing, and it's not 3 of them. So like, come on. Gets, just would be helpful if this was accurate is all.
Okay,
And those
Well-
FAQs, they're online too.
well, as chair, I try to follow the FOIA, the open meeting requirements. I, try to maintain the, make sure that we have the agendas posted, in along with our staff that does a lot of work behind the scenes to, post the meeting, post the agenda. We have a pre-planning meeting where we put the agenda together. We go over materials, what we're going to discuss, what the staff is going to provide, understanding of, kind of background materials, information that the commission will need for discussion. And as chair, is also my intention to try to follow the policy and procedure of not, of maintaining that more than 2 members, if 3 members are having a discussion about JFAC business, that is not compliant with open meeting requirements from my point of view. And
Right, we were saying the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
That's not in dispute. It's about a discussion.
Right.
Because if I write something down and put it on a website, that's not a discussion. That's all I'm trying to say.
So I will, I just wanted to clarify that. And ask again, reiterate that if you have something that you like to share with the group, that you send it either to me or to Emily or Aishi. And if you have, and as always, when I send out, please let me know whether you're going to make it to the meeting. I ask that you just, send it, send a reply to me. You don't need to reply to everybody, whether you're going to be there or not. Okay, do we have, anybody have any other questions about the remote meeting policy that we have to pass? We have a quorum, we can pass it?
Can I grab this?
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay, do we have a motion to approve the
Move to approve.
meeting? Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Good job. Moving on to the next. So the next agenda item was overview of the meeting policies and FOIA.
Went a little out of order.
Yeah.
but Yeah.
So now the meeting minutes.
Yeah, so I only got one comment from Diana and I incorporated those, so thank you. Was everybody else able to review them? Any additions that you would like to make? I also printed a couple out if people want.
Yeah, we're gonna try to do better about
Yeah, going forward.
going forward.
Will not be a lump
Because
sum.
that's another thing that
Yeah.
needs to comply with the open meeting requirements is to have minutes for our meetings. And because we were recording for the several years during COVID, we just didn't do the minutes.
Yeah.
But now we are doing the minutes and they are
There's
pretty,
a lot of stuff,
they,
but they're.
they're pretty
Okay.
because the recordings exist, they are also not, extremely like, this one member said this, the other member replied that.
They really shouldn't be for meeting minutes. It shouldn't be that detailed.
Do you want to just explain, you incorporated a requested change into the minutes?
Yes, you're.
Explain what that was.
Yeah, I think it was regarding our last meeting.
Just a typo.
It was the addition of commissioners discussed long-range planning for the Quincy site, 601 South Carlin Springs, and the Trade Center. I added that in.
Looks like there's an attachment with some virtual meeting.
Yeah, if there was anything in the chat, I included that. Yeah.
Interesting, I wasn't sure what those were.
Oh, really? Yeah.
That explanation, actually, I was like, what's this random? Okay.
Is that, I don't know if that's, like, why do that much detail?
Because you don't see them on the video, like, and there's a video, you don't see what's in the
But meeting
chat.
minutes are not intended to accurately reflect everything that's said. So it's not like you take meeting minutes
Not
plus
verbatim.
this appendix plus the video. It's like video plus appendix of written comments equals meeting minutes. It's just like meeting minutes are supposed to cover that business, right? The agenda items, who's there, votes, motions, but not verbatim. I like if I was a member of the public and maybe I don't want my verbatim comment put in these meeting minutes for forever either. I think it's I would like to make a motion to strip
What, the chat?
the chat from the meeting minutes. Yeah.
There.
If there's something in the chat like Wells says, yes, I vote for passing the electronics policy and he's allowed to, like, that makes sense. So, but you would put that in the vote.
Is there some kind of
Yeah.
structure to the minutes that you were advised on to do those?
Yeah,
Did you-
That's
template?
link to Teams recording, Teams transcript. You provide like a summary of the item, what was discussed in like 3 to 4 sentences. Not seeing here exact guidance on public speakers. Oh, wait. I mean, yeah, here it says like name, who they're with, presented on this.
Is somebody
I don't think
in the staff reviewing your minutes?
Oh, Matt. Sorry.
Is he reviewing your minutes?
Hi, everybody. I think I can maybe shed a little bit of light on this, and I think this it dates back to our practice when COVID first started and we first started doing virtual JFAC meetings. So I think this was my recollection is back when maybe when Kathleen McSweeney was still chairing, or maybe even Greg Greeley. Just trying to figure out, because people were having these discussions in the chat and how that gets kind of captured, because as Stacy said, the video record exists. And so it's sort of as a supplement to the video record, not really intended to be part of the minutes. But just because there is a video record and, probably it's not legally necessary. But that has been the JFAC practice going back to 2020. So if you have thoughts
Well-
about a different way of doing things going forward.
So the JFAC practice going to 2020, we already acknowledged was not in accordance with the expectations because we weren't keeping meeting minutes, right? So past practice is not necessarily indicative of we should keep doing something a certain way. And we've got comments in here like, thanks for letting me, I'll look at the setting. The shared screen keeps shifting every few minutes from Teams to the draft document. I mean, and also if I was a member of the public, like I would be like, oh, I don't want to put anything in the chat because
Right.
that is captured verbatim.
No, that's
Versus the commissioners can sit there and squawk and say things that it's not captured verbatim in the meeting minutes. And I just.
What
I
you
think
just read
that's-
was ridiculous. I mean,
I don't think we should include the chat because again, the purpose of meeting minutes is like to capture the business of the body, not to capture verbatim some or all of whatever's been said. And there's reasons to object to having those videos online, frankly, as well. So I move to strike the verbatim.
Disagree. I will say, I mean, members of the public aren't supposed to be using the chat. They're only supposed to comment during the public comment period.
The more reason not to
Yeah, but
introduce it in the meeting minutes.
Matt, what do you think?
I mean, I think we do try to encourage using the chat just for technical issues, just as an example. Bill was having an issue earlier hearing, and so I was here in the chat, trying to assist him with that. But there was a time period where JFAC members were having substantive debates in the chat. Again, this is back in the early days of COVID. That's maybe not happening as much anymore. So there may have been a time when, it was relevant to capture that.
Yeah.
Because that was the only place that substantive conversation was happening.
But it's relevant to capture that at a certain level of detail, regardless of whether it's happening in a chat or live in person. Because if it's important as a summary of something, then that should be captured, but not verbatim, not because it's in the chat.
So what's your motion to get?
To delete the replication of the chat materials in these minutes. And if there is something substantive, like I vote yes on a thing, that still should be reflected in the actual agenda, like the core, this is the business that happened.
Vote tally.
Yeah. That's my motion.
Second.
All in favor of striking the chat?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
I'm opposed, but because I was hoping that we could, the vote got called very quickly. I was hoping that we could discuss the possibility of including only substantive chats, because I think that any substantive comments might inform the discussion that does make its way into the minutes and provides important context. And B, I think to Claire's point, any substantive comment that's made during a recorded public meeting, carries an expectation that it's going to end up as part of a record. And if there's no other record of it.
Sort of not. It's business that needs to be captured, not necessarily deliberations.
Are there any? I
agree. For the most part, anything that's important that's going to be said in the chat is going to be put out for the whole meeting. That will be something that we can pull out anyway, correct? Somebody's going to vote yes on something. It's going to be recorded.
Yeah, a vote, you have to.
Right, it's going to be recorded.
That's right. And if someone makes a motion in the chat,
Right.
you have to say so-and-so made a motion, regardless of whether
So those are important.
you do it in the chat or orally live, and then, yeah. And this will also matter once we switch to all virtual meetings too, right? Because again, we don't want to sit there and replicate every single thing verbatim in the chat just because it's in the chat.
So for what it's worth, in the planning commission, the minutes, at least when I was there, did record discussion. So if there was substantial discussion, somebody dissented, or there was a debate, the practice then was that the board would want to know the nature of the discussion, and in that case, commissioners wanted the personal opinions attached to the. I'm not saying that's the way we should do it. I'm just saying that.
That there's different
that's-
reasons.
I'll
There's
just
like.
finish real quick. That there is a case to be made for taking what's in the chat, deciding whether it's relevant, and putting it into the minutes, that there was a major objection to X, Y, or Z, and that there was a lot of discussion. But I agree with you. We don't need to, transcribe the minutia verbatim.
Or be consistent. So we have to go and we have to include the discussion that's live if we're also worried about the discussion that's
Right.
captured in the chat.
Yeah.
I do, just for example, here, the November 15th draft minutes from there, there were several, that's the number I have too, 55% on residential, I think, but there are 2 links shared on here by Matt Ladd that I think could be included as relevant additions. I think if we take out the other chat that were not kind of broader, part of the discussion, they're like, thanks to everyone, definitely agree with 2 to 3 years, I think we can take, that is captured in the video, that's captured in the other minutes, but I think, I think there is some discretion about what we could include, and I think that's maybe what Wells is saying too. Like, I don't want to just paint it with a broad brush and say never put anything from the chat in the minutes.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Or just
But
write.
be consistent. If it's important.
Right.
And he shared it, on paper or a
Right.
drawing versus
Okay.
a link on the chat. If those rise to the occasion of this is important to capture in the meeting minutes,
Right.
you
Right.
include them, but not because of the form that they're submitted.
Right.
And I don't know, sorry, if anyone's used AI yet for meeting minutes? Anybody here?
No.
That, it's not a transcription. AI actually makes a judgment about what's relevant to put it.
Really?
Yeah, you may like it or not, but it's actually pretty good.
Really?
Yeah, but then somebody needs to read it and see.
Right.
Yeah.
But the
Until
point
it's
being
really
that even AI doesn't just transcribe things.
Planning commission using?
I've used it with work.
Oh, wow.
I'm sure it would cause a stir.
Okay.
But the point is that just a raw transcription like Clara said.
Right.
It's kind of sensitive.
Could I move to include these 2 links that were shared by Matt Ladd?
Sounds good.
Second.
From the November.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor?
That's great.
Aye.
Okay. And in the future, let's kind of do it like that. Like if there's something
Yeah.
like links that were shared or other kind of something else that's not captured on the in the video, then that sound good?
So for the first one, just the links from Matt.
Yeah, the commercial market resiliency presentation and the commercial market resiliency work session video.
Okay. Do you want to just,
Those minutes include all the votes though, right? You're not just depending on, oh, it was in the video.
right.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
So like these, I assume you don't need these, not single card.
Yeah, let's skip, those are.
Probably this one too can go. It's like, there's a typo.
Yes.
Okay.
All of those.
You don't think any of these, well,
The
This
one was
one.
Andy, it was like a draft, it was draft language that went into our recommendation or something like that.
that was going to go into the letter, and that's captured in our public communication.
Okay.
So it was just Andy making a suggestion, right?
Okay.
So
So-
it doesn't need to go into the,
That's it. So, yeah,
Okay.
I'll do that going forward.
okay. Thank you. So can I have a motion to adopt or approve the meeting minutes? How many meetings is it?
I so move to adopt the meeting minutes from November 15th, 2023 to present.
Okay. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry, who's seconded?
Who seconded? Oh, I guess I did. Oh, thank you all. It's helpful. Okay, so the next agenda item is the Arlington 2050 envisioning discussion. Everyone, I think I've mentioned the Arlington 2050 visioning several meetings before, but our groups have been requested to give feedback by September the 30th.
On what?
I'm gonna read.
Yeah, because the only thing I know about the Arlington 2050 was the initial dinner meeting
Yeah,
where people.
I mean, it's,
did pictures
and
on
we're
postcards
still,
and that's all, right?
yeah, I have a couple of things, I've, kind of been given direction. And so we are asked to, talk about our priorities and, how we envision, and I'm gonna take notes and I'm gonna send those notes, and it's just a brainstorming, it's just a visioning. So, let's
We
see.
need to shift our karma from the meeting minutes discussion.
From the,
Yeah.
to like,
Okay.
what are the next
What do
25
you
minutes? What's the framework?
So here we go. The board asks each organizational leader to help solicit their membership's involvement in the Arlington 2050 process by hosting an envisioning discussion with their membership between May and late September. The board welcomes any creativity in how this discussion is structured and asks that at least the following be incorporated. Share the postcard from the future activity. I don't have any postcards, and that was like drawing a postcard and then mailing it in. Share Garvey's message at the beginning of your envisioning discussion. And I'll read that right now. Community building and robust civic organization and engagement have always been core facets of Arlington's culture. The county does its best when its residents are engaged and empowered. That is why the board is taking this year to hear from colleagues, residents, and neighbors across Arlington on what they believe our community should look like 25 years from now. We are requesting your group's input into the Arlington 2050 Envisioning Tomorrow Together process. I believe a strategic plan will come from this process, but we are just focusing on visioning this year. Think of this process like a planning trip with friends or family somewhere. Everyone first decides where they want to go and what they want to do. How are we going to get there? What do we need? And of course, how much is this going to cost are questions that naturally come later, but only after you've decided where you want to go. So we will ask you two things. One is the postcard from the future, and then hold a brief discussion at your next meeting to share your thoughts with your colleagues, but please think and discuss through the lens of your group's priorities. And then here are the prompts that we will follow. What are your group's top 3 priorities? If resources weren't an issue and you were able to implement those priorities in 2025, what would the effects be by Arlington 2050? Would this impact all of Arlington or just your neighborhood, industry, or field? And then in 2050, what new issues do you think your group will be focusing on? What challenges will Arlington face? What does success look like in these areas? And so I wanted to just kind of get what are our broad, as a JFAC, from a JFAC perspective. And I want to
just bring up again the Arlington Community Facilities Study that was referenced back in our pre-IC recommendations.
Our mission.
Yep, and our mission, that created a recommendation that led to JFAC's creation. And, you know, the principal challenges of Arlington are a scarcity of land for public facilities, dealing with changing demographics, a threatened commercial tax base, and a strategic facility planning and priority setting, and the need to revamp our community dialogue. And their recommendations were to make maximum use and reuse of facilities we have, encourage joint or shared use facilities, build up rather than out, create new land, collaborate with jurisdictions for shared uses, establish a land acquisition fund. And then I like their executive summary. With steady growth, evolving demographics, and a changing economy, now is the appropriate time for Arlington to take a step back and examine strategies to meet our community facility needs. Arlington is considered an enviable place to live and do business, with a highly rated school system, a solid economy, distinctive neighborhoods, and strong community voices. These successes are a double-edged sword as we are challenged to keep pace and address the needs of the entire community. Old solutions can't solve every problem. Facilities built by past generations are aging, and in many cases, demand for services is exceeding capacity. To overcome our insufficient land holdings, we will need to think differently and use our resources more efficiently. So, and our JFAC mission here, collaborative long-range facility planning, and to include input on capital facilities and needs assessment, joint uses. So as we think of that, you know, if we could have a wish list, you know, what are our 3 top priorities now? What do you think 3 priorities could be? What do you think those would be the same priorities 25 years from now in Arlington 2050? I mean, I think one thing is certain is that there won't be more land.
They build over 66.
Well,
Out into the Potomac.
Yeah.
If we're visiting.
right.
I don't think I'm envisioning this, you know, like over the Potomac. With
That's probably
Little
not going to
Island.
happen, but
Like-
66.
I mean, someone did at the Arlington 2050 event, someone recommended, I think it was our former JFAC chair, Kathleen McSweeney, said, do a big dig project and build over.
Actually, people over there have been talking about that, and right there. I mean, that's a huge, I mean, that's such a creative,
Right.
but there's other people who, I mean, right in Boston, Virginia Square, who want to build over 66.
Yeah.
Right.
And do a field, do all kinds of stuff.
Right, build over, I mean, they did it for WNL, but Kathleen's suggestion was to build over 395. Because right now we have that, you know, especially when it comes to schools, we have Hoffman Boston and Oak Ridge kind of on the other side of, well, only Oak Ridge is on the other side of 395. And it's really, which makes boundary changes really hard to balance enrollment, and that those are the 2 schools that, while we see under enrollment in other schools, in other parts of the county, it is those 2 schools that are over enrolled. So, I mean, I'm just throwing some ideas
But
out.
along the lines like that, that's like some really creative thinking. I mean, that takes, you know, building over 66, looking for green space wherever you can get it. I think that would be totally in line with the mission for JFAC, and that would be a really big deal. And hopefully something that we'd get before 25 years from now.
Yeah.
But that would be I think that'd be great. And it'd be really important, and it'd have to fit in with a comprehensively thinking about everything. But I think that would be, along those lines, being creative, looking at other places for space, also being creative.
Right.
And that means things like the Key Bridge Marriott and other places. Like, we need to be looking very seriously at what we have for joint facilities and everything else.
And similarly with Trade Center, that's such a large tract that is so inefficiently used right now. And we know that there's some kind of an optimization study plan, but in terms of like, what's the engagement and the creative thinking about, for example, some of the uses in Trade Center, do they really have to be situated within Arlington? We're sending our composted, the organic materials are going outside of the county rather than our, running the operation inside the county, but we're doing all the leaf stuff that's still situated in trades and also up in North Arlington. But are there creative ways to recapture some of that land in Trade Center and actually potentially do things that would be considered attractive amenities rather than, kind of yucky industrial uses like you have right now?
If I may, like you did refer to, we are doing an optimization study. Best of my knowledge, what I've seen is only to deal with county facilities, schools and county facilities. We've introduced a new element that maybe there should be some civic use of the site.
In terms of visioning, Aji, yeah, that, could you contemplate something that not only addressed the, facility needs of the county and APS, but also potentially attractive commercial development, residential, more units. We've got all the, units right next door already, and they're not real happy with a lot of the uses right now, obviously. But from a vision perspective, yeah, I think that should be in play.
I think for me who works there, I'd love to see the mulch pile go away.
What'd you say?
I said, for us that work there, we'd love to have the mulch pile go away because we know it all the time.
That would have been high on my
Right.
list after walking around there.
Yeah.
Maybe like because we're trying to do, kind of very high level visioning. I don't know if getting into specifics is what we should report back, or if we should instead say like, we want better optimization of land.
But I also think it's important. It gives people really need concrete examples or they just can't go there.
For examples, right?
Yeah, and I think
Sure.
what you pointed out was really important. I think the whole idea of covering over 66, I don't really know about 395, but that sounded good too. I mean, those are the kind of things that outside the box, and I think it's important to give examples. So I don't think, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have talked about that for years,
Which one? All of them?
over I-66.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're doing trades optimization. I'm just like, I'm not sure that those, wow, this is.
I mean, these are,
Well,
again, I'm gonna just, like a lot of these things, like the create new land. That's the like building over 66 or putting fields on tops of parking garages and, kind of those kinds of ideas that those are also identified in the community. Those are broad, kind of broad ideas, as well as collaborate with other jurisdictions for shared uses such as the trade center stuff. And, are there other, kind of as, at the Arlington 2050 event, they were talking of, they had a climate, Jason Salmonow was there talking about how the climate will change, how the climate will change and the kind of planning that needs to happen for.
well, he was talking about, heat islands.
Yeah, heat islands.
I mean, which is what we're headed for with a lot more density. We need to be really careful about that.
Right, and
And we need to be reusing our old buildings. I mean, we need to be doing much more of looking at our old vintage stock and seeing what we can do with that versus thinking we're just going to clear it away. I mean, that's really important. And that goes to directly to climate change.
yeah. Buildings. And the other thing that, the other thing that was spoken about at the Arlington 2050 kickoff event was the demographic changes. Like Arlington, the man Hamilton Lombard from
Right.
the University of Virginia was talking about how Arlington's population will continue to grow, but based on current trends, we could be losing student population because young families are moving out because they can't afford to live here and because other places are more attractive to raise kids. And so kind of planning for community facilities that attract young families and, create,
Right.
continue to maintain a strong school system and attractive place to live.
But actually it wasn't in that meeting, it was here. It was really interesting, the demographic information. I forgot who was presenting it. And it actually showed a blip up for seniors,
Right.
which I thought was super interesting.
Yeah.
Meant that this was becoming, there was more, and actually it goes to climate change. The hotter it gets, people are coming up further north. In Williamsburg, DC area is becoming more of a senior attraction. I thought that was super interesting. So are we treating, so just like emphasis going to young families and, and schools, we should also be looking at our senior facilities. Because, are we doing enough? And I do think in those kind of joint facilities, that's really important. But I thought it was interesting. It was here. It showed an uptick.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. Yeah.
And we've seen a drop in, because of declining birth rates.
Mhm.
Seen a drop in if you look at the demographics, we've seen a drop in the 0 to 4-year-olds and also the 5 through 19-year-olds, just as a percentage of the population and as a raw number, which I think is interesting too. So kind of planning adapted to changing demographics.
I was just thinking, since we're JFAC, looking at potentially joint use facilities that can be sort of more schools for certain times when it's needed, or things like that, where you're accommodating some community needs and schools needs, that it could be, I don't know, space reconfigured as needed by the school's population more than anything. Sort of along those lines.
We do have some of the, like, Thomas Jefferson. That's a joint use facility.
Right.
Yeah, the examples we have of co-located facilities are run down and neglected by both groups.
That's not good.
I mean, I
Maybe
have to
focus
just say, like,
Focus on better
joint
and enhanced
use
of-
is not always going to end well.
Wait,
Well,
you're talking about between like seniors and young, or for
I'm
everybody?
talking
Those
about
are
when
good
one
schools,
building is
county.
responsible, like 2 people are ostensibly responsible for that building, that space, and it ends up being the neglected stepchild of
That's
both
that's
families. If we look at,
Vision 2050.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Dealing with
if we
that.
look at Drew, I know, but
I know Drew has some issues. I mean, my kids all went to Jefferson. I get it with the community piece versus school. And that's a school that's definitely needed some TLC for many years. But I agree with you. I'm just saying it's something to improve because there's also some, I mean, when I go to Lever Run, it's like vibrant. It's like got so much stuff going on there that, a new building, but there's so many things happening there.
but it's not that, it's joint use within
Yeah.
one
No, I get it. Yeah.
entity or, one governing body.
But if we are going to do a fantasy and vision of
Right.
how we would like to see Arlington.
Maybe my point is, we need to say, we want a vision of a better structure for collaboration because the current one is not working. As kind of a real visioning, and if that means there needs to be, I don't know, a separate elected position that you get elected, that's your portfolio to work on joint something. I'm just throwing that out as
Yeah,
a total
I mean,
off the cuff, but
It's been a
the
eternal
current thing's not
problem.
working.
It's been an eternal challenge of JFAC to say, it is, I think it is something that we envision, this joint use. And if we are going to make the best use of existing facilities for a changing demographic, I think we have to kind of have this creative vision, like, okay, well, this, for example, if student population declines and we have a school facility that
has more open space or is completely open. What are alternative uses for that building? I mean, we don't want to just let it sit there and not be used. Can we provide for universal pre-K or community childcare, for infants to pre-K, infants to 3-year-olds within school facilities for teachers, for members of the local community, that would be an attractive, that would, I'm just brainstorming there.
I mean, I think, what I'd love to see is establishing patterns of use that are healthier and lead to better well-being. And so the idea of the 15-minute city and thinking about how we might, and this is joint use, but individual facilities, but how we might co-locate facilities in community areas. So for instance, Westover is a great example. It's got a post office, it's got a school, it's got some retail, it's got some coffee bars, it's got some apartments, some single family. And so I think that if we could develop these nuclei in all parts of the county, so everyone could walk to a little retail, walk to the common good place like a coffee bar. Our schools are such wonderful facilities and they bring people together for events. Wouldn't it be great if these things are not so diffused and separated, but if there's a little bit more. So let's say people who are going to a school run into some seniors who don't have kids in school, but are made younger by having little kids around, except for the crappy ones who complain about noise.
Get off my.
But I think that if co-locating facilities, and then it gets, I think, said it about swing space. If you have buildings that are close together, they can expand and contract to meet different types of uses.
We were talking about little hubs,
I'm talking about hubs, yeah.
little hubs.
Neighborhood hubs,
Well, but you have,
15 minutes.
15 minutes, I like
Walking.
that. Yeah, I mean, 15 minutes, if you can do something like, with empty buildings, you can also do what, was just said about civic uses. So it's not just schools. I mean, it's community, you can have civic purposes. You can do a lot of things.
Yeah.
And then people can walk there.
Like even, I mean, I've been going to Madison Center lately and it's kind of an amazing community hub in a lot of ways. It'd be great if there was a little, Starbucks or something right there. And,
Little coffee shop.
yeah,
little segment.
just or like folks who have kids in preschool could walk over and use the exercise equipment. There's a lot going on.
Well, like the Langston Center, I mean, they have stuff. I mean, there's
Like
all
you said
kinds
about
of.
Lover Run, yeah, it's just,
Yeah.
but they're all diffused. They're one-offs. You drive over there and there's not this kind of
Well, it's-
symbiosis.
They're not all diffuse. I mean, like
Well, there's a lot of diffusion. I mean,
Arlington Forest, for instance, Lever Run's got they got their shopping center down the street. You're right. But you can go there, you can hang there, and there's a bunch of things to do right there.
good planning would bring those things together a little tighter.
Well, it doesn't have to all be, but yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. I mean, I'm trying to think about Thomas Jefferson. Yeah,
This also tracks with climate and thinking about resilience, and resilience hub type things, like if there were an emergency, places where people know that they can go.
Right. Walk.
Something bad is going on, so that kind of ties it.
Exactly.
The tension is if you can do a lot of diffuse things, it may need to be on a smaller scale, each one. But we also hear often from our county that they want to do, the big showcase with the maximum number of things in one place and kind of like check a lot of boxes off at once, rather than doing ticky-tack,
Mhm.
little like, oh, I
I'm
can buy
talking
this.
ticky-tack.
Talking about fundamentals.
No, it's.
Small.
So-
If
Like
you're
what makes
talking about
sense in this
walkable, you are
neighborhood, yeah.
talking about small scale.
Well,
I can't walk. It would take me 15 minutes to walk from one side of Williamsburg Middle School to the other side of Discovery. Right? You're talking about a lot of fill-in if you want to turn that into something else.
I think you might be surprised at how easy it might be to accomplish some of that. And I don't think it would
To
be,
do what? To make it all urban?
no, not urban, but to co-locate uses so that you have, I mean, I've always, okay, I'm going to push this a little bit because I've always thought about, you know what, where I want to retire is a village. I want to live in a village where I can walk and stay healthy. And,
I feel like I am in a village where I am. Where are you?
okay, but not all Arlington is.
I
Lion
understand that.
Village.
And, well, I'm not in
Lion
Lion
Park.
Village, Lion Park. And so, are you Westover?
Get it right.
I'm in a ticky-tack neighborhood.
Oh, you're.
More than an
Did
insult.
Claire say that about your neighborhood?
No. Let the minutes reveal.
So you're in a village, you're in the Tiki Tac village.
I'm not in a village. Okay, I'm in North Arlington.
Oh,
And I
okay,
can, there's nowhere to walk. That, it takes me a half hour to walk to Lee Heights.
there you go, okay.
And so there's a lot to be said for a walking environment where people can get to services without a car, past their neighbors, where schools are a nuclei. Maybe next to the school is the post office, where it's, you know, Westover is a great model, I think, where these, you know, Key School here in a courthouse is great. And so you have sort of beginning, sort of nascent elements of these things. And where investment, let's say, you know, Jenny Dean Park is an incredible facility. If there's just a little more thinking and planning, you can start to bring these things together so there's a greater level of symbiosis.
So.
Could I clarify what I meant though about the?
Ticky
I'm
tack.
Yes.
No, but I'm trying to say, like, from the county's point of view, if they acquire one parcel and enter into one design build contract and put a basketball court, a tennis court, and, you know, a little a gym with a workout room and a pool table in one place, that is easier logistically than for them to say, well, on this stretch of road, we'll add, you know, we'll acquire this small parcel and we'll put the pool table, the county pool table in this small space, and then we acquire another parcel somewhere else. So that's what I meant. I think ticky-tack is good. And I think, I actually think that's more dispersed, right? But I think the county is not inclined to prefer that.
And that's why we need to
More
state a
com-
preference if it's.
Right, we may want to do that, but we have to overcome some of that
We
hesitation.
already have a lot of dispersal. I'm just saying that think about how you organize and collect those things so that the whole is greater than the sum of parts. I mean, and I agree with you, there are some things where you want the big splashy, like the big splashy stuff like the aquatic center should not, in my opinion, have been strung out in a very
In one
difficult place
Yeah.
to reach.
Kind of.
That should have been more centralized, right? So certain things do rise up in the hierarchy and belong in a centralized location because we're proud of them and they work together. You know, people build civic centers.
But
That takes
They
a
don't
lot
like
of,
scatter the
Longbridge takes a lot of space, so there's not a whole lot of places right in the middle of Arlington.
And there's also opportunity there that we're not realizing.
Yeah.
We can actually do a
Undeveloped
lot
land.
more there that we're not doing, that we should have been doing. Because there
Well,
is a whole
just as a
population
for
over in there.
instance,
Huh?
The aquatic center could have easily been located on the other end of Longbridge Park where it's more accessible.
Where the soccer fields are.
It could have just been.
Well, soccer
redesigned.
fields are important. I mean, there's, but you're right. No, you're right. And you have I know, I got that.
But
Anyway,
So-
I mean, I would just, you know, I mean, I love this discussion. I will say
Oh, you
though
want me to
that
direct
one of
us?
the, no. But one of the challenges of Arlington is that we don't, you know, one of the challenges of our public facilities, I think, is that, and available land is that it isn't always where we need it or want it,
Sure.
you know, and so it's,
Large scale, yes.
yeah, large scale or small scale, you know, and it is, you know, so
you'd be
how,
surprised.
and then my next question too is, you know, and I very much appreciate this idea, you know, I live in Ashland Heights, which is, and I do live in a village.
You do live in
know.
a village.
I do, you know, I can walk to coffee shops, I can walk to the post office, I can ride my bike to the farmer's market, I can ride my bike ride my bike here. I mean, there,
Since we're giving for instances, like
Yeah.
about the Episcopal Church at Glebe and Old Dominion. They had a parking lot. They would like to see if they could put some, 3 or 4 story buildings, I think, on there, maybe
I
some
didn't mention
retail.
that one, but where's this one? Oh,
So-
wait.
So that's right next to Marymount. That's next to a university.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, this
Right?
is-
So if you've got parking lots and salt domes and, there is land there.
yeah,
So-
It's called planning.
right.
It's called planning, but the
Yeah.
piece that's
Just look
missing,
through park. And so then
but the
my,
piece that's missing there is transportation. And so if you're gonna
Buses
start
go.
doing, now if you can't, you have to do it comprehensively. You can't just put something like that there.
You have
And then
your-
everyone's driving. Everyone's
So,
driving,
no,
that's
but-
more cars.
The point is
The
that
point is
that's,
the village.
no, that could be a nuclei for that.
I hear
neighborhood.
you, right?
That is not driving. I could walk there in half the time that I walk to Lee Heights. So the point is not to have to drive everywhere.
No, I understand that.
and so.
And that's something we want
I
to
guess
avoid.
from a JFAC visioning point of view,
Mhm.
even from a JFAC mission point of view, what is that planning exactly that needs to happen? And, what do we have to do to get there? And
Stacy, but if I might, sorry, I didn't cut you off. I think 2 examples. I worked on Cardinal. So I appreciate the example of Westover. And I think you're right. We pulled in everybody when we did Cardinal. We had representatives from Westover Retail, actually even the ownership group. And there was an interesting thing that I recall. They reached out to me and they said, hey, we want to redevelop Westover. So if we support the school, would you guys support us? And we were like, of course, but then we have to build more because we're going to need more people to live in there. But it was an interesting collaboration because some of Westover Retail wanted us to increase parking. But that now clashed with the fact that we wanted more green space. So as you can see, we ended up not putting in a parking lot. But I think it was a very good example of multiple bodies, multiple interest groups in Arlington coming to work together. We obviously had Westover Library that stayed in place and is still there and didn't be built. Another example that I think Claire mentioned and Diana is when you talk about your future planning, like even for the 2020 is TJ and Ms. Thomas Jefferson. Because we actually are looking at that. That is on our feasibility studies. We're going to look at that next year. But if you think about it, we are focusing on what APS needs Thomas Jefferson to be. And we all know that the community center is there. And because that is not under our control, we are not able to suggest what should happen to the community center. And I actually do feel that JFAC could say, don't allow APS to go it alone, right? Pull in the community center and create a village. Like, if I'm thinking that we really are going to be forward thinking in Arlington, that's a huge parcel of land.
And to do what there, to redo the school?
To redo the school, like you all have said, we are all aware that Thomas Jefferson needs to be improved. But
Right,
one
yeah.
major issue is we have the community center. So it's not like Cardinal, for example. Cardinal is almost the opposite. At Thomas Jefferson, we only own, if I remember correctly, I think we only own our building and the rest of the site is owned by the county. That's one of the reasons why we squeeze the fleet into that little corner, because that's what we
No, and
could.
there was also a fight about the park.
Right, and.
Which I was part of.
County land,
Land.
it's on a.
Yes.
Which one?
Yeah.
Fleet?
Yeah, Fleet is.
Yeah, no, I was part of that the
And-
park group that was.
Cardinal is the opposite, where we actually own the entire property. But we are leasing, I think it's a freehold for in perpetuity to Westover Library, so they're
Right.
there. And as you're all aware, we just built an underground stormwater facility for the county, so that's even, well, the good thing about that is it ensures that remains green space for a very long time.
That's a great example because you've got all the components there. You have some commercial Glebe Road and then right across in the building, you've got, Ruthie's all day. You've got apartments, speaking of the land,
Wrote me about Route 50.
why not underground Route 50 right there?
Yeah, because I was thinking, since I'll be honest, maybe I'm the architect in me, like when I look at TJ, if we're in Arlington and we want to be ambitious, Thomas Jefferson can be a multi-story site, the entire site.
For what? For schooling and.
For everything.
Mhm.
Should have green space, can have elevated green space, so it can have park
There's a
area.
lot of green space now, but
It does, but then we can utilize that entire site for multiple things. So we don't have to lose the fact that it's green space. We can elevate and keep our green space at higher levels. And then we can
And then-
utilize the lower levels to create,
oh.
what do we call it? An elevated village.
Hmm.
So you still have all the components of a development, but you are now stacked up.
Well, that would be a real, that itself, what you're talking about. I mean, that whole neighborhood would go, Arlington Heights. I mean, that would be not something that I think would fly. But I do think that school needs and that community center needs. I mean, I have 3 girls who went through Jefferson. Oldest is 37, 35, and 26. And that school needed to be redone when my oldest went there. And it got a very little window dressing kind of upgrade. I forgot what year that was when my youngest was there. It's embarrassing. And then Fleet gets built. I mean, it's just insane to see it's awful. It's like anyway, that's my.
I mean, just to sort of tie that up a little bit, and it's tie up it does, something that we've always talked about in JFAC is kind of seamless collaborative planning between APS and the county. Right now, it is, they plan separately. I mean, some things they plan jointly, and it's gotten much better than it was 10 years ago when I first was involved. But it's still APS plans here, county plans here, and they come together to plan. They kind of shake hands, and then they walk back to their, to their bases, and and then plan on their own, and then come back and so I think, I think it would be, I might suggest, or one of the suggestions that I will make, as for the Arlington 2050 thing, is this kind of seamless collaborative planning, however that happens.
Yeah.
I mean, JFAC, when I joined JFAC, there was discussion of a public facilities master plan, and that schools were included within the comprehensive plan. And we've discussed it, on and off for years. It's now off of our charge, but
Whatever happened with that? So can't we put that back on? That sounds like that's such a smart idea. Why can't we put it?
We could
Limitation,
I'm sorry?
county staff limitation.
Well, that's fine.
I mean, we could
2050,
we could include it in our Arlington 2050 visioning. I mean, I think
I
there's
would.
something.
Right. There's
Because that's what you were just talking, right? You were just talking about that, about that you own
Yes.
part, I mean, the lack. I think that makes so much sense.
And
Stacy.
Claire is right there. When we did Wakefield, it was extremely difficult because we have APS and we were working with the county, especially the stormwater project that we worked on them is the reality of pulling it off.
Yeah.
Is not easy, but as you can see, it can be done.
right.
Wakefield High School.
No, Cardinal.
Cardinal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like a storm drain.
When the stormwater.
Yeah.
Right, and you guys bypassed JFAC entirely. We had zero input and information about it. I'm just saying, like.
Just a
again,
sidebar.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just be honest about it.
Everyone would like to be more helpful in the process. The JFAC would.
Or we have to recognize that that's not gonna happen. And that when it really comes to push and shove, and, oh my God, we've gotta get this done, there's 4 people in a room and they get it done.
True. But that was,
So then what are we,
But it's good to
Well,
put
that's-
that on here. I mean, the public facilities master plan. I mean, that's a good
We're
idea.
brainstorming. I mean, I just think, I don't know
I mean, I think it doesn't have to be the exact iteration that it was imagined when it was first imagined, but I do think like seamless collaborative planning. We just go back to the community facility study because I think that is fundamental to what the work that we do in this commission is that land is our scarcest resource. And, we can raise taxes, we can make more money, but like we won't, a cornfield on the edge of town is not just going to show up. And so I think we have to make the most efficient we have to plan to make sure that we are that we're using each site in the most efficient way with the most broad vision of these kind of walkable communities and attractive communities for young families, attractive communities for seniors, attractive communities for great schools for our school age kids, and opportunities for jobs, for everyone. I mean, I think those are sort of that is where we are, and I think this is a good discussion.
Yeah, and I think the collaboration, because I think, I'm the neighborhood near the Quincy site, and so that's another example of a uniquely situated property, and a lot of frustration with goals of long-term planning. And the county, it seems, is sort of like inching its way toward using it for a purpose that is only county, but it is uniquely situated between a high school and an elementary school, which is also oversubscribed. And I got involved because I put forth a vision to do there, which is a performing arts and art school. Regardless of whether or not that happens, we've had conversations about ways that it might be helpful, because we don't need the seats necessarily there, could benefit from elementary school, but sort of if we are building specialized space, how can be best used by both the county and APS? So talking to Embracing Arlington Arts and identifying some specialized like studio needs that might be beneficial for both arts as well as county use. So trying to sort of look at that and have both the county and the schools be able to focus on many sites, but in particular this one, because it's sort of been languishing for a bit. Want to make sure that it's both highest use for that land, highest value use, because it is so uniquely situated from a school's perspective and also from transportation perspective. So it's another way, it's another way to sort of bring in. And when I first envisioned, I envisioned much more of a school, but I also included a coffee shop, a sort of community aspect to it. And it does seem that way you're getting foot traffic in there too. So it's, and you grab your sandwich before your class or before your studio, practice or things like that. So I think, that's not, I would like to see something like there. I think a lot of the people in that area would. That may not happen, but I really feel it should be a school's purpose there. So, but that's the sort of thing where I think only if we can help facilitate those comments, to the extent we can help facilitate, great. Would love to be sort of part of that collaborative process as well. But to your point, collaboration, I think we're all in favor of that, county and the schools.
And I think planning toward that collaboration is also really important.
I'm going to be the naysayer here. Because right now the county provides nurses in the schools, right? The schools do not replicate the whole entire nursing structure for themselves. They rely on the county to provide that service for students. Why do we have bifurcated planning? Why do we have bifurcated transportation systems? It's not that the county can force the schools to accept something, but if the county gave the schools less money and then the county doubled its planning department and doubled its transportation department and said, do you want us to take care of this for you? That you don't need collaboration on every with like every detail mapping. You need collaboration at the top of like, do you want this? Yes or no? Just like we have with the nurses. Do you want us to provide the nurses or do you not? Yes, we'll take them. Thank you.
So
What you just described is, I do agree with how Libby framed it, is think about the trip you want to take.
who framed it?
Libby.
Oh, Libby.
The
I mean,
trip-
that, oh, this thing?
Yeah, in the thing I read.
Sorry, go ahead, sorry.
The trip you want to take, right? There's a question about how you get there, but if you don't know where you're going, you don't, what's the point of even talking about how you're, what bus you're jumping on? I mean, I think that the idea of like, for instance, what if the folks think, the role of nature is, trees, street trees, or natural areas, increase them, decrease them, more street trees. How do we, that's a big issue right now.
Yeah.
Is tree cover. It's important to kids. Kids learn better when they see a tree out their window. People in hospitals, it's proven, they heal faster
Less crime.
when there's.
Heat islands and.
So what's the role of trees? What's that? What's our vision of the future? It is hard. I agree, Claire. It's really hard to achieve these things, but a lot of things we don't even know what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Maybe we could say collaboration or consolidation. I guess that's what I'm
Yes,
trying to
actually,
say.
that's a good point. So
Like,
raise an example
I mean, I
about,
think, like you said.
We're not trying to take away your
No,
job.
The
This is
seamless,
yeah,
the seamless is great because I'm not sure if you're aware. It proposed taking the Virginia hospital site. That was one of my projects when I did the CIP. And I don't know where it went. We did the study on it. And ironically, one of the uses we wanted it for was for a temporary facility we could use for swing space. Because one of the things that we were talking about that time, we were looking about, well, all the projects that we've now finished, we hadn't done there. Cardinal, which was the Abingdon, these were all being planned at the time. And we knew that we did McKinley, we did about 4 or 5 projects we knew were upcoming. And then we knew all of a sudden VHC site became available. And we did talk to the county about, could we get the site? I do not remember the reasons why we were not able to get it. But I remember going to the site with my architect and we looked at the fact that, all right, could we put a structure up here? And we pointed out exactly what you said. It's very nicely co-located. It's nicely situated between Kenmore and Campbell. So I very much agree that that's another example where your suggestion had come up. Who knows? Maybe it could have been because I think one of the things that came up was, well, when you guys finish swinging your kids in and out of the building, well, what happens to the site? Because it's too close to the middle school. It's not big enough for a high school. So what do we do with this building once you finish all your construction? So I think that became a question that.
Springs Road.
that was a showstopper. Really, the traffic on Carlin Street. Question of impact on traffic. It's I'd be literally a showstopper.
But I would like to just, what Claire said, actually, if for 2050, consolidation or collaboration, or both. And consolidation it is really important because we're just one Arlington. And it is sort of silly, all this, these turfs, this silo. Right, silos. I mean, silos within government, within county government, silos between APS and the county. And it just seems like we can break some of that down.
Right.
So for an example, not in this purview, but like the healthcare system. Why on earth does the county not have a healthcare system that is just one system for all employees of both APS and the county and county employees? I mean, that would be efficient. That would make sense. Probably be economy of scale. We'd probably get better services, better healthcare. So I think that's really important for us to say for the future.
Okay,
Can I have one other quick
okay,
thing?
and then you have to move on.
We all just lived through a restructuring of work facilities because many of us are now teleworking. And I think we shouldn't be blind to the possibility that the facilities and the services that they provide that we think needs to be like the way it is now, it may also end up being more distributed. I don't know if doctors are going to take patients in their ADUs in the back of their houses and, I'm just kind of giving that as just a silly example. Or look, I mean, some people do volunteer firefighting and they have smaller scale, more distributed, but we just saw it with work in centralized places. A lot more things are happening in the home or in other like smaller scale. So I think I would suggest we say something about like, consider whether facilities kind of to your village. I like that theme of like facilities, the physical facility is going to move to a more decentralized or smaller scale or something. I don't know, but I just
Facilities,
or home-based or who knows, like
flexible, I don't know. I'm trying to.
flexible makes it sound like it's a big
Bulk,
building and you
right.
can move the interior partitions around versus
Facilities
like
needs of
the services.
based
The
on
services may move outside of how we conceive of a facility.
services.
And that's not something I can say, oh, this is how it's gonna happen, but we saw it happen with work.
Yeah.
It could happen in other
I
ways.
mean, and you see it.
The Health and Human Services Department, maybe those people, ER, right? 911, now those folks work from their homes, right? So you don't need the same emergency management building facility. So it's just things like that.
Well, if we're overbuilt with commercial facilities right now, and the workplace of the future is not going to rely on these centralized offices, that could be some land recapture. I mean,
Right.
if you're looking that far into the future, maybe they get
Smaller scale
repurposed for residential units in some cases, but maybe some of them just need to go. And something new goes where those
Yeah.
overbuilt facilities were.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good point, and I think that's sort of what I wrote is, facilities, services, change, and planning open to evolving to that change. And I think that goes to kind of also, valuing the value of sites, land, and kind of reusing and making the best use of each.
And you included the kind of dispersed village concept as well.
Okay, dispersed. And I, just one more thing. I don't, I think that if more people work at home, the kind of village community, the kind of walk in to get a coffee, to kind of mingle with your neighbors becomes more important, because if you're working at home, you're not interacting with other people. And so kind of getting out and having to go to the post office or walk to, being able to walk to services instead of just get in your car and drive out, I think also becomes a very attractive quality of life.
But on the other hand, I mean, it's also important to have those trees and parks.
Yeah.
Because those are also meeting places.
Oh, yeah,
So
absolutely.
I just, it's a balance.
Yeah, and so it's all like the value of our land and sites.
You're also rewiring the transportation system if you no longer have nearly as many people commuting to and from
Right.
work, right? And so how does that start to ripple out looking that far into the future?
Right. I mean, that's one of the things that I love about this Arlington 2050 visioning process is that, when you get, right now we are looking at it from a JFAC point of view, but like the Transportation Commission is, I guess there isn't one anymore, but the other commissions are looking at it as well and bringing their points of view. And so when we're visioning this, we're visioning, okay, well, if we're going to have this village, if the county sort of agrees to adopt that kind of village model with, shared use facilities and community-based resiliency hubs and, the kind of responsive to demographic changes. And then then there'll have to be changes to planning of transportation. There'll have to be changes to planning, of, more bike trails and more, it's interesting. I looked back at Libby Garvey shared with me I guess it was the 1980s, the last time there was a visioning, and it envisioned the bike trails in Arlington. And like the Arlington Loop came about as part of that visioning. And, so this is, just kind of things like that.
Yeah, and they are, and I just wanted to say, I went to the C2E2 meeting on Monday. We're not necessarily going to adopt what they did, but if it's of interest, I'm happy to share that. They did have a pretty fulsome sort of series of things covering electrification, clean energy, transportation, development, resiliency, equity, and green jobs.
As functional as we are.
I thought it was an interesting meeting, actually. So and that was their second discussion. So I guess that was the other question. Is this we have this and then we're gonna plan to have another conversation, or is this our conversation?
I think because the deadline is the 30th, I'm just gonna kind of compile the notes, and it's not, anything that is like an official date. I just
We
that
will
was
submit things separately.
yeah. If you want
More to say.
separately too, there's nothing.
Right.
So I want to just be mindful of everyone's time. The next agenda item, which we've gone over, is the legislative priorities. We were asked to make recommendations if there were legislative priorities we wanted to suggest to the county board to take to Richmond, but I couldn't think of any. So if we want to just skip this, anybody have any
to JFAC? Yeah.
Yeah, specific to JFAC that, and if you have some thoughts, but they aren't fully formed and you want to email them to me later.
Well, do you want to ask for legislation that mandates the development of a long-term plan for county? See if that makes it on there.
Yeah, I love that.
Um,
I would have a legislative priority of our joint facilities or facilities continue to be funded for sustainability. Energy, I know that's E2C2, but as much as we can get commitments for solar, for retrofitting buildings, saving on buildings like you just mentioned, repurposing buildings. My legislative.
What would be are you asking for budget impact, or, because I think these are more, they're asking about laws that could change.
So there's probably some laws that I don't know for sure that would facilitate easier coordination with like Dominion Power, for instance. There's probably some laws about how to, make community energy systems more effective. I don't know, but I mean,
okay.
if you're asking, that's a
joint-
priority of mine.
Yeah.
Funded
Maybe-
for sustainability? Is that what you said?
Well, this piggybacks a little bit on what one of the public commenters has said in the past of looking at our electric grid, scrutinizing it more and treating it like a resource, like a facility. Do we have maybe transformers at the right spots for all the upgrades for electrification, right? So maybe that could be something of either we request a study of what's the delta between current electric grid capacity and resources versus what it needs to be for kind of equitable electrification across the county or something. Because that's, of course, the big limit in the trade center optimization, which is they don't want it's expensive to upgrade the transformers at the trade center to support full electrification of the fleet there for electric buses. Now, I keep telling you guys that you should have dispersed fleets so that it doesn't cost so much, because you can then piggyback on the transformers elsewhere. But putting that aside, maybe that's kind of what you're getting at.
But why would you go to Richmond for that? I mean, I can see what you're talking, Why would you go, what would you, what's the ask?
The ask would be a study on
Study?
what the
Resiliency.
current electric grid, treating it like a resource, like even though it's not owned publicly, but like what's the delta between where Dominion currently has its capacity and resources versus where, if we had equitable electrification across the county, what would we need?
Libby's actually wrong percent and resiliency and safety and security of the grid.
And this, and just to be clear on where this falls in JFAC, is that you are kind of considering the electric
As a
grid
facility.
as a facility.
Yeah, even if it's not publicly owned, it's a way of conceiving, just like when Steve has said sometimes, of like green space is a non-concrete stormwater facility, right? Like
Infrastructure.
right, so we're thinking about maybe not the grid, but maybe the ability to upgrade the grid, like that kind of thing.
And those
Because it
substations
definitely
occupy
impact
land.
planning.
Substations are.
Yeah, they occupy land, that's right, and it's very expensive all the time when apartment complex want to do retrofits. Dominion says, oh, sure, we'll do the retrofit if you'll pay $100,000 for us to upgrade our substation. And they go, that wasn't in the budget. I guess we're not going to do this. So if we treat it as like a thing we need to plan for, even if we don't own it, and that may mean, yeah, the county pays for substations to be dispersed so that all the people in that community area can upgrade. And that's, I mean, I'm just saying, yeah,
Right,
or
we get involved in all the.
privately owned
issues.
and publicly subsidized or something, yeah.
Okay. Share that feedback. The next agenda item is a discussion on the adopted county CIP. This was placed on the agenda with the intention of kind of looking at it very broadly. We didn't really get a chance to, this was on the agenda for a full discussion back in June, but we didn't have a quorum. So we canceled that meeting, and I put it on this agenda with the idea that we would look at it broadly and kind of identify several kind of future agenda items that we can discuss or that we have questions about. Yeah, this isn't like a full discussion on the county CIP, but just there are several facilities projects in there that are, let's see, I took some notes on that, you know, that are kind of joint use and public facility projects that are also interrelated, that I think we can lead to further discussions. So I'm just gonna pull up that.
So is Jefferson number one?
This is the, yeah. CIP. Is
that right?
Yep. They do have a facility condition assessments. I thought were interesting. But they won't be complete until fiscal year 29.
Wow. Wow.
And I mean, one of the things that I wrote down was, you know, for a potential future discussion or to ask for more information on, because I was really interested in these facility condition assessment reports. And one of the things that I wrote down, could some joint facility assessments be expedited to align with APS's deep dive studies?
Yeah.
So if, you know, maybe that's something that we can add to a future. I don't. Just. Yeah, let's just go down to the facilities section. It's sort of the last couple of. That I think fall more under. Yeah, maybe the last couple. So here are the facilities maintenance projects. There is some work to the Madison Community Center. There is, okay, going down. Those are maintenance projects. I'll reiterate how much I appreciated the county CIP wanted to focus on maintaining existing facilities, making that a priority. Thought that was a wise use of resources. Okay, let's go down. These are all maintenance projects. Let's keep going down. These are like window replacements and circulation systems.
Are we just talking about anything or are we answering questions?
Yeah, no, if there's anything that you see in here that you have questions about, that you would like to see on a future, I mean, I also had quite the courthouse complex renovations and infrastructure. There was I would like to understand more about what the plans are for that. Because it says it's planning to vacating Courthouse Square West within 7 to 10 years. What's sort of the long range vision for of the vacated building, and kind of sort of the and what the investment, and it wasn't really clear to me that whether you're moving something into so which building, the courthouse complex, so is one building getting the couple floors renovation for the hypothermia room and the homeless service center and courts programs and DES programs, and they're moving those programs out of the Courthouse Square West? It would just be helpful, I think, to have some kind of clarification. Just interested.
Yeah, I think that sort of like when we were looking at the CIP before it was adopted, this struck me because I think our conversation about the funds for the schools,
right,
either TJ or Montessori or whatever it be, and sort of gave me a context for a building card, a context for money. And I looked at this and said, that's a lot of money for this sort of not really defined use for a building that we are planning to vacate. So it all sort of like comes together, your question, and then sort of like where it started before. It's really unclear both why this amount of funding should go into 2 floors of a building rather than a new, like, major renovation to a school or something, especially since we're planning to vacate in 7 to 10 years. And yeah, what is the plan after that?
Right. Yeah, I mean,
are selling it, or what is that?
Right, and that I just think that is a possible agenda item that we could take on. What does it mean? I don't. The other. You go down to the next slide. Systems, furniture, the Carlin Springs site and the Trade Center optimization plan. I think those, I would like to discuss those along with the relationship. Is there a relationship between the two? Steve, you brought up before that possibly the the animal shelter might move.
Right, that was being discussed
Right,
at least at one time,
right.
presumably in order to free up their space for something being done with Trade Center that had not really been discussed.
And
So
yeah,
far as I
think
know.
that was on hold, but are they still?
The animal shelter,
That's what, I mean, I heard about it, but I mean, for them to be at Glen Carlin. you know,
I'm
it's-
hearing that that's probably a good way of putting it. It's very expensive. But the question still remains about, well, what is the plan for that northern part of Carlin Springs?
Right,
Including what's the public engagement plan? How will JFAC be involved? There certainly are potential
Mhm.
APS uses, and APS has legitimate
Yeah.
interest given, so I think, and I think also the Quincy site.
Oh,
that
yeah.
Diana's already mentioned it. It's sort of like thinking about the portfolio of sites that are in play and how they're interrelated or could be interrelated, rather than just thinking about each one in isolation
Yeah.
as though it's not connected potentially to the other sites.
yeah, so that's a really good point. Quincy would be a good one. I mean,
Quincy's not on here, surprisingly.
yeah, so why, we should be, that would be,
Right, but I do, what Steve was saying, like the portfolio or the full, I would like for JFAC to not look at a site in a silo.
No, I get it.
want us to look at these
well, you should look at
interrelationships
Trade Center.
or to identify these interrelationships of the site, as we, because there is not information necessarily for us to respond to, but we can say, hey, look, this is interrelated. If this does happen, then, if, for example, the animal shelter moves to the spring site, then that is interrelated with the trade center optimization planning, and if the trade center optimization planning and the bus parking and the county spaces and the new county bus parking site is related to the
Quincy.
the Quincy
Correct,
site. And
right.
so all
So
of those things
you're
are
moving
interconnected.
these chess pieces around on the board,
Right.
and yet the process is not really enabled looking at the whole chessboard, and
Right.
thinking about it,
Right.
That would be a big thing, that would be a big thing to look at,
Yeah.
all of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have like sort of in the near term at the Quincy site, it's moving toward, I think, building I can't remember the name, emergency preparedness, no, that's sorry, something like an emergency preparedness, and having a redundant site. The problem is if that proceeds, and again, I feel strongly it should be a school's purpose. If that proceeds, it's inconsistent with using it to have kids there, or even community, like if we build performance space or, anything like that. It really would take over the site, and it is not the highest value use for that site. It's, you're talking about storing large pieces of equipment and having some, defined number of people probably working in offices. So it seems to not really put good value on land that is really ideally situated. So I think the community in the area keeps focusing on schools, and we keep on trying to figure out ways to make sure that the community, that the county and APS are able to have productive conversations. So
I continue to be concerned about any outdoor activities along I-66 till we have electric vehicles, because there's a massive amount of air pollution. I really don't think we should be putting our kids to I-66 to be outside.
okay.
I mean, I think all of these sort of long range, I would like, I hope we can add these, have a discussion on these sites. And I think kind of the interrelatedness of them is, and kind of long range visioning, possibly for each of the site, and not necessarily creating a plan, but like, okay, here are these threads that connect, and we are just identifying them for your, I think that would be beneficial to the
right.
to the boards and to the decision makers, and potentially even to staff. I would hope. But I think that those are, I think having the discussion about these sites is absolutely within JFAC's charge, and it's something that we should work to do.
Are we trying to flesh out what hasn't been decided yet, or are we trying to?
All of this has been decided. I'm just, we didn't, our discussion on the county CIP was limited, we really only discussed the county manager's presentation and a very broad overview, and we didn't look at county sites. And a lot of that just had to do with timing, and a lot of that had to do with the way that APS does their CIP and the county does their CIP, which is very different, and they're very different. And the APS gave us a lot of information to give feedback on, last year, because first there was the pre-CIP report, and then there was the facilities condition assessment report, and then there was the CIP direction, and then there was a budget, and then there was the CIP. Then they had their superintendent's proposed CIP, and we barely, so we didn't. The county didn't give us a lot to discuss. And so I would like to focus at least the next few months on county issues and, kind of, we're not going to ignore APS because they're part of this collaborative planning and part of this visioning. But I would like for the next few months to be have a focus on county issues.
What I'm hearing is that there are at least 3 large sites, Carlin Springs, Trade Center, and Quincy. And perhaps there's a look at them holistically by this committee. We start thinking about what are the needs, what are the uses, what are the best potentials.
And also the other site, right? Shut down.
Which site?
Oh yeah, the courthouse square west. We just have questions about it. Like, I don't think it's a big site. I don't think it's, just curious about what the planning for it is.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a couple other things. There is the Columbia Pike Library, which is currently within the
Career Center.
existing career center. And they're planning on building a new one on.
Now that's a gigantic deal, that whole thing.
Yeah,
And that's just,
yeah. I mean,
it's big, controversial. I mean, it's all kinds of stuff.
yeah. I mean, anyway, I think we start with the Quincy Trade Center, that interrelationship. But just kind of identifying these other projects, the Columbia Pike Library, and that is also the joint. Once it moves out, it will leave an empty space within the Legacy Career Center. And I think that's also worth a discussion, maybe not right away, but
That community is
Yeah.
happy.
it's,
Yeah, there's lots.
something that we talk about in the future.
And Lee Community Center, I mean, that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. There's other, keep going down.
There's an issue that
There's also a proposed Crystal City Library. And this is the facility condition assessments and planning studies. So I do think that maybe in the next couple of months, we can ask about these facility condition, what's going on with the condition assessments, and kind of how in depth are they? And would it be possible to expedite some of the joint facility ones, like the, it's not going to be done until 2029. Would it be possible to align it with the APS condition assessment report, which are very valuable planning tools? So the Crystal City Library, they're looking for a site for that, but it's
it will be developer contributions, but is there something, are there other joint uses that could go in there, along with the Crystal City Library, that could be considered? I mean, I just was sort of looking through it with questions and kind of brainstorming and, how is, how can JFAC look at this? I mean, there's other fire station sites, we think of facilities often as schools and community centers, but fire stations, police stations are also facilities. And we also, as the community grows and houses get built, we need fire stations. Anyway.
Okay, so this will be at future meetings, next meeting perhaps. Longer session
Yes.
on this.
Yeah. Unless, and if there's anything else you'd like, something that you see from here that you have questions on, or that we can get more information on.
Just distribute this.
It was,
Sorry.
it's okay. Yeah.
I think, well, that's a lot. We've gone back and forth in terms of this synthetic turf program. And that is one thing that I know Steve and I have looked at a fair amount, and I know others have expressed interest. I've talked to some people from 2E2 and from FAC about it, and there's a lot of interest in terms of, I guess, reevaluating overall the benefits of synthetic turf versus natural grass, sort of being the overall overarching. I think a lot of developments have happened, over many years in this area, a lot of concerns, some improvements in some of the materials, which seems to be an emphasis now, but it's one piece of the materials. And I think we've started to do analysis, and I've sent you a lot of backgrounds, longer pieces, and then one shorter piece that might be definitely worth looking at, we've looked at some things on cost, which were kind of eye-opening to me and I think others, and they were consistent between Arlington, Virginia and Arlington, Mass. They did a very thorough public engagement process on synthetic turf, which I think brought together a lot of information, and some was in favor of synthetic turf and some wasn't, and then sort of came up with an overall staff report on it.
It brought the outcome from that.
Well, the outcome is sort of like will be seen over time. There are some specific recommendations in the report, which I would have to, maybe you have them memorized. I do not.
I do not.
Yeah, so
It was very balanced. I mean, they didn't come out. We've seen a number of jurisdictions banning synthetic.
Really?
And there's been a lot of litigation recently. This was a very balanced, largely health, but also environmental impacts.
Right.
But Arlington, Massachusetts, it was very impressive, all the public meetings that they held. And so it really gives you a sense of the pros and cons. And I feel like the county seems to be accepting at face value a lot of the assertions from industry about, the benefits of synthetic turf. And I'm not sure, I don't feel like I've seen a documented cost analysis that lays out all of the costs of ownership of synthetic turf versus natural turf. For example, it seems to be perceived that synthetic turf is basically maintenance free. And I don't believe that's actually correct. Of course, it's marketed that way because it sounds great, right? Oh, you don't have to mow it, but how much maintenance actually is required to keep it safe and in good condition? And what does that cost? As one example, I think just recently I saw some stuff that was reassuring to me about the current plans for the underlayment to use organic materials that would potentially not be environmentally concerning to me, at least. And some stormwater discussion that sounded encouraging. But I know I'm concerned about microplastics, the wear and tear.
Also air pollution. The kids are breathing that in and it's going into the right.
Exactly. So the kids are still developing, and so any exposures, the industry claims that it's PFAS free, but it appears that everyone who's actually tested the products has found PFAS. So like, okay,
So that was one of the
Which is
conditions
cancer
in the
causing.
Arlington Mass report was that the material had to test by an independent lab as PFAS free. And it was, so I said, well, is that just basically saying you can't do turf because none of it actually tests PFAS free? I think the other thing that I found really interesting, there has been limited engagement on the Kenmore Field conversion. And there was a very structured forum that asked some very good questions about the fields and parking, and entrance to the fields, and configuration for different sports. And it was very structured. And then there was a one sort of free-form comment area. And it was striking that it's not just Steve and I, and it's 25% of the comments that were put in that free-form comment area were against synthetic turf. And nobody asked, are you in favor of synthetic turf? So you had to go through all these other questions to get to that.
So it was a design concept review, which was great. I mean, it was a good thing that the county and the APS were reviewing the design concept, but there hasn't been any engagement that I can see on, let's look at the questions that have been raised about synthetic turf, which I think literature review shows there's valid questions that have been raised all over the country and internationally as well. And it's a substantial capital cost, $10 million for Kenmore and $34 million in the CIP, looking at all of the planned synthetic field conversions. So that's significant money. It would be one thing if we were talking about a small expenditure, perhaps. We're talking about a cost that's commensurate with some of the other things we were just talking about. So, and because it is joint between the county and APS, I feel like that brings it within JFAC's purview to look at.
Another topic?
But are you suggesting that JFAC come out against the bond, reject contracts? I mean, it is moving forward, so I'm trying to understand.
What I would suggest, and I don't know if Diana would agree, but I would suggest that we express observations based on reviewing literature, not just making stuff up, and take note that there doesn't appear to have been a public engagement process to look at the pros and cons. And instead, it seems like it's been a rush to judgment. Oh, well, these things are wonderful. That's 5 times more playable than a natural turf field. A lot of kind of unsupported assertions about them.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you remember the field at TJ that got a lot of, Nancy Van Doren led an effort to get rid of that, the kitty litter. It was called the kitty litter field. And it was for environmental issues. She had kids who, I think one of her girls or maybe 2 of them had asthma, but it was there was no big public engagement. It was just going to the county board and, the open mic session and complaining and having people, that kind of thing. But yeah, so I think
It's like.
That sounds like
it was almost like, as a tennis player, like, hard true. It was like, it was, I forgot what the actual surface was.
Probably crumb rubber, the crumb.
It was the.
There are different types, so I'm not familiar with everything we use.
It was
There
It
are
was,
some,
Right.
I think the earlier synthetic surf that came up, which I think we may have, was more plastic based.
yeah, this wasn't synthetic. It was like a clay court or.
More, yeah. they have some
Okay.
It was
coconut husk.
going
But it
up in
was still
the air.
particular.
So we got rid of it, but we got rid of that. And there was also one over at, the park over on Barton Street, that also had the same kind of field. And they got rid of the same kind of surface. Anyway, is this part of our purview?
That's my question. I mean, I do, it is a joint
It's
project,
joint.
but I think from my perspective, JFAC's
fields, joint fields do fall under, and it is a CIP project, which is also within JFAC's purview. But I think the specific issue of whether or not synthetic turf is healthy and safe, I'm not completely convinced that it falls under the avenue in which of our mission and charge of like long range facility. And I feel like there have been decisions and a lot of information, for the last 10 years about these synthetic turf fields that have not been a part of JFAC discussions. Historically they've been within the
Sports.
it was Parks and Rec or sports or another county commission that is not JFAC. And we all have individual passions and as individuals, I encourage you to advocate, and I'm willing to help find, avenues. We can have I think we could have a discussion. Does this fall within JFAC's mission?
Well, it's about sustainability. I mean, you could take it, like Brian was saying. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I are others interested?
Public benefit.
But there
that
is,
broad,
but there
maybe
is like part of,
benefit
right, and part of the, at least part of the justification for the synthetic turf, as far as I understood it, was that it allows for more community use because, when the weather, natural turf fields, my kids played soccer, when natural turf fields are wet, you can't use them. And, a lot of the synthetic turf fields are under lights and they can be used, from 8 a.m. until 11:30 at night, frequently. And they, whether it's raining, whether, in most weather. And so I think that there's,
let me kind of just maybe add an angle to this,
Okay.
which is if we thought that a planned facility would be maybe not utilized by the community, it's not welcome, it's not the right fit for the community. Like if someone's like, oh, let's put a racetrack somewhere and everyone's against a racetrack, I think we would maybe say, is this the best use of this? Because we're hearing from the community that they're opposed to the racetrack. Not that we are opposed to racing, but we are hearing from the community that they're opposed to racing, as an example. So I wonder if this could be not that we are opposed to synthetic fields for health reasons, but we're not sure this is the best use based on that public feedback where we noted there was a lot of rejection of this. And ultimately, if the news reports come out tomorrow of like, keep your kids off these fields, they're not going to be used. That's just like,
but I don't know.
I
don't know that there has been, and maybe this is part of the problem. I don't know that there has been, staff provided information, that says that I feel like that alternatively for the last 10 years, there has been staff provided information that says that this is this is a conversation that JFAC has not historically been involved in, like we have been
No,
other field space and siting and
I agree with that, but I
don't want to not talk about it, but I just want to make sure we are staying within our lane. And I want to make sure that any advocacy for any issue goes through the proper channels and is going to be heard. So
I hear you, Stacy. And what I'm suggesting is I don't think it would be appropriate for me to even ask JFAC to take a position expressing opposition to synthetic turf conversion. But I do think it would be appropriate for us to essentially make the observation as a matter of record that we haven't seen public engagement to address the legitimate concerns that have been widely raised about
I think that's a good point.
But didn't we, wasn't that in our CIP recommendation? I don't think there was specifically about public engagement, but we did ask for more information. Was that it said several, which I did feel like reflected the conversation, that several board members quoted in your letter, and several board members brought up the issue of synthetic turf fields and.
But all you're asking for a bit, but it'd be good for us to sort of push just to get more public engagement. Because what you were talking about with Arlington and Mass, we don't even compare. We didn't do
Yeah,
it.
but there's that. I think there's the, since then, we've also had this, I mean, that's a lot of comments to go through this structured forum that didn't even ask, you know, for synthetic.
I mean, I would also
And the
offer, like, perhaps we raise an issue, you know, perhaps, you know, one proper channel is for us to write to our commissioner colleagues at the Sports Commission and at the Parks and Rec Commission and say that this has come up here, you know, as a joint issue, but we, you know, this really falls under more your purview. I mean, we could also, you know, if it's an APS field, then I guess we would, you know.
Yeah, there'd be some overlap. But that's a good idea.
Right, but I think sort of engage, you know, sort of and say, you know, we have several, you know, several members have done a lot of research and would like to, you know, advocate with, you know, I think maybe it was sort of a collaborative, you know, statement, you know, or some kind of.
Or some kind of push to get some real true public engagement.
Yeah,
We haven't
you know,
done, which
you know,
you-
some, you know, some
Yeah.
kind of engagement with
Or
the other
them,
commission,
we-
of which I believe this really does fall under there.
Right. I mean, when I was on the Sports Commission, this is the kind of stuff we talked about. Was fields.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
Yeah,
back
'cause
then. I mean, I was a tennis person, but we definitely talked about fields. That was it. So that seems like it's much more in their wheelhouse. But that said, there's nothing that says we can't collaborate with them and
Right.
talk, because it is
Right.
about
Express interest in a
facilities.
working group. The
Yeah.
goal of public engagement.
That's
I
fair.
will mention, I wrote to Susan Cunningham 2.5 months ago, roughly, because we had a bit of an exchange back and forth. And I essentially said, I'm really interested in any like backup information, data that the county has to show that it's done due diligence, and looking at the concerns about the fields, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't even get a reply from Susan, which is slightly surprising. It probably got lost. And I think she asked questions, and the county DPR did like a 1-pager that came out in July that responded a little bit to some questions that were raised about the heat impact and the stormwater. And I feel like the answers were pretty good, but a number of the other issues, you know, were not addressed at all in that 1-pager. So I'm still wondering, there must be some analysis, but I haven't
Yeah.
seen any of the
I
back.
think writing to the committee, writing to DPR, writing to our commissions, I think.
Yeah.
C2.
I think that's the
Can we
first,
also
yeah.
include a health commission? I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
What off the top of my head.
Yeah, the health commission, yeah, I mean, there's SHAB at APS is the Student Health Advisory Board. I think we could write to
So
them.
you did not get a response, or you did get a response from Cunningham?
Did not, and I'm planning to follow up with Susan.
You should just go to a county board meeting and go in the first part of the open.
They always love to see me.
You should do that, man. you know, you get responses right
I
away.
know, I
And
know.
there is actually follow-up. That's how, I mean, when Nancy did the thing on the kitty litter field, a bunch of us went with her. We all wear the same shirts. I can't even remember anymore. And she went up there and spoke. And,
No, they don't like the same shirts.
I want to make Steve.
why? I think that'd be fun.
No, because it looks too polished.
Oh,
It doesn't look grassroots.
whatever.
So the question is then, does it come from you saying we're interested in the working group? I'm happy to draft whatever might be appropriate for your review.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that.
So maybe,
Yeah.
yeah.
And send it.
Well, we, sorry.
Everybody okay with JFAC doing that?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
track record hasn't been very good lately.
No, you've done some good work.
Okay.
Are we done?
I think we're done. Oh, I should ask for public comment.
Yeah, one last.
Anybody have public comment? Sorry, it's gone over. Okay, hearing none. Meeting adjourned.
Adjourned.
Okay.
I like sitting back here. I can't see myself.
Now, when my kids.
Thank you for the meeting.
Thank you for coming.
Running the, oh, yeah. I was showing a house
Socks and shoes
the
are
rain.
covered in the little bit.
Oh, yeah.
It's awful, and I'm like, how do I
Run.